Good afternoon. I'm Susan Tomasich. Today I have with me Calaveras County Planning Director Gabriel Elliott
Thank you.
and Planner 3 Gina Cathan.
Yes.
We are here today to talk about the zoning code update and how it affects the citizens of Calaveras County. Gabriel.
Thank you. Well, first of all, let me kind of give you an overview of why we're doing a zoning code update. When the general plan was updated in 2019, there needed to be some cleanup that had to be done. Our zoning ordinance, which is also called the zoning code, it's been kind of in the works for a very long time, and we've taken this opportunity to kind of bring it in line with some of the goals and policies of the general plan. Now, Gina is going to go into the specifics of how we are actually going to accomplish that in the most effective manner. One of the things that I think members of the community need to be aware of is that this zoning ordinance is going to look slightly different from the original one because we're changing format. But from that particular standpoint, there isn't a whole lot more to say. Most of the content will be transferred content. Some of the we're going to see a lot more tables in this particular version of the zoning code update. So without much ado, I'm going to have Gina kind of walk us through the rest of the process.
Sure, thank you. So back in 2021, we initiated this whole process. We have contracted with Miller Planning and Associates as our consultant to help us with the draft. And we're finally to the point where the entire code is in draft form. It is ready for public review. Actually, we've had the first part of the code, which is the zone districts and use regulations, has been out for public review for approximately 1 month.
Okay.
So we have taken the entire draft and broken it up into 3 sections, mainly for ease and for more kind of workability throughout the study session process. And so the first draft, of course, is out for public review. The intent is to invite the public to our Planning Commission study sessions, which actually begin tomorrow. And we will just commence the study sessions and continue them until we are finished with the preview or review of the entire draft. So again, tomorrow is the first study session, first of many, and we will be introducing the first section. And the public is encouraged to attend and participate, because this is not just a code for our ability to to use, but it is for the entire county. So it is the document that is regulating all of our land use, regulating specifically buildings and structures and the types of uses that are going into those buildings and structures. And so, again, it's not just for us, it's for the entire county. And we're excited to get this underway. We're excited for a more clear, concise, user-friendly code. We'll be updating the code to meet all of our state and federal regulations that we seem to be outdated. In addition, probably the most important is the implementation of our 2019 general plan.
Okay. So let me ask you a question. Let's say I have a piece of property that right now is zoned rural residential or RR. And the general plan update, the Planning Commission found that I've got 10 acres, I'm in a whole bunch of parcels that are all zoned RA. What difference does it make to me if I'm RR or RA?
Well, for starters, the rural residential zoning is a residential zone, placing the primary emphasis on residents. The RA zone is actually a resource zone, which actually places an equal emphasis on residential and resource generating, like agricultural uses, alike. So there is a difference. You will find a lot of land use designations that currently allow both RR and RA. And I think with this code update, we are really trying to differentiate a difference between RR and RA. Not that there's a whole lot that's changing in the specific base zones, but there will be a few changes to the rural residential zone in particular that will kind of draw that line between the two zone districts.
Okay.
You
So
may
it's in,
also, one of the other things we've done to date is we've sent out notices to property owners whom we think are going to be affected by the zoning code update. And to let you know, we've gotten quite a lot of phone calls.
I would imagine.
Similar to the question you just asked and other types of concerns. So I think through the study session process and answering these questions, we want to bring to the community a sense that we understand what the concerns are and that we're willing and able to help with trying to disseminate some of that information, which may seem technical. For example, if we say that we're removing some overlay zoning, what does that really mean? For example, you talked about the RR zones. In the RR zones, there are certain overlays that apply and certain other nuances which make some people a little bit concerned. So I think that as we go through the process, we're able to flush out that type of information, and we have wonderful staff who have been fishing phone calls and trying to get back to the community as much as we can.
Okay. So in my mind, I really need to be concerned about this and aware of what's going on with my zone, because right now today, maybe I don't care what I can do in RR as opposed to RA, but 5 years from now, I may care.
Yes.
And if I have a long-range plan, then I need to make sure that my zoning is correct up front, so I don't end up in a situation where I've just put in 10 acres of grapes just to find out that my zoning doesn't allow me to bring in the grape pickers I need or the grape crusher that I need. There's
Right.
certain rights that are associated with each type of zone, and
Right.
that's where my concern should lie. Is that correct?
That's correct, and that's one of the reasons why we made sure that we're sending out as many notices to property owners as possible. We're not just doing a general notification in a newspaper. We're making sure that each and every property owner whose information we have is sent a notice about the details of the zoning ordinance, just to flush out these kinds of concerns. Because it is true, we've seen that happen before when we did the general plan update, where certain properties that the general plan designations were changed, and the property owners were not totally aware because they were not paying attention. In this process, we want to make sure that everybody pays attention so that you don't get into a situation that you just described, whereby you may not think about it now, but 5 years you have a long-range plan, and then 5 years from now you realize, oh my goodness, property zoning has changed, or something has changed about my property, which may not allow you to do what it is that you planned on doing 5 years before. So, Gina?
Yeah. So the proposed draft update actually proposes to eliminate 2 base zones and eliminates some overlay zones and then combines a couple others. And those are the individuals that we've actually noticed. There was over 5,000 parcels that there's a combination of zoning that would be changing if in fact the draft code gets adopted the way it's written today. So
Okay.
of course we don't know what it's going to look like at the end. That's the whole purpose of the study session. So we have started to receive some feedback from specific property owners of concern. We are duly noting all of those comments and look forward to some further discussion with the commission and the public starting tomorrow.
Okay. And then for the benefit of the public, let's say I decide 2 years from now I really don't like this RR zoning that I'm in, I wanna be RA. And I come to the planning department and what kind of a cost am I looking at to even apply to have that zoning changed?
Well, of course, I can't tell you what the fees are gonna be like, 5 or 6 years from now, but currently, today, I believe the fee is around $5,400, for a zoning amendment, application.
Okay, so there you have it, folks, $5,700, unless you wanna come to a meeting and get that zone taken care of before it ends up being an issue for you.
Well, that's not entirely what we're doing. So, so we're
Or
not
maybe
taking, we're not taking specific requests for people
Okay.
to change their zoning. The purpose of this practice is to update the ordinance, not, amend the zoning of particular properties. So as a result of the proposed changes in the ordinance, we are proposing to eliminate 2 base zones. One is rural commercial and the other is rural home industry. Now those properties that are currently zoned RR, or RM and RC will be rezoned to another zone, but this is not an opportunity for, in your scenario, for someone to come forth that has a rural residential zoned parcel and asks for it to be zoned RA. That's not what we're doing.
Oh, let me
Do you wanna-
just change that a little bit. What I really intended was that if you are changing the zone as part of this zoning update and I disagree with it, now's the time to do
Absolutely.
it because later it's gonna cost me money.
Absolutely.
That's really where I was going with that.
Right, and Gina, you may also want to go into the reasons why we're doing the RM and the RC.
Yeah.
And what the implications are for those property owners who currently have that zoning designation on their
Yeah.
property.
So it's the base zone that really dictates the specific land use.
Okay,
And so, getting back to the 2 base zones that we're proposing to eliminate, the first one is rural commercial. I think the rural commercial zone was intended to allow commercial uses in more rural areas of the county. Unfortunately, it hasn't really been implemented that way. So the RC zone is only allowed in the same land use designations that the other commercial zones are allowed in, C1 and C2, which is general and local commercial. When you put the 2 zone districts side by side, RC and C1 are very similar. So it doesn't make any sense to have 3 commercial zones that are all overlapping in uses that are all allowed only in specific zone, land use designations. So, so the proposal is to eliminate the RC zone and to rezone all those parcels that are zoned RC to C1, which is local commercial. So, if there is a use that is, previously existing, and it doesn't conform to the C1 zone, then we can either have a discussion of zoning the parcel C2, or perhaps even just referring to the use as a pre-existing legal non-conforming use. So what we don't want people to get confused about is if there is a change in their base zone, that it doesn't eliminate your existing use. So it doesn't disallow it. It doesn't make you an illegal operation, which will go ahead and lead into the next zone district, which is the RM zone, which is a rural home industry zone. That zone district is in place to allow approvals of conditional use permits for some smaller scale industry when it is in conjunction with a residence, hence the name rural home industry. Out of the 13 zoned parcels in the county, only 12 of those actually had approval of a conditional use permit for a specific use. Out of those 12, only 1 of which is still in operation today. That use will be allowed to continue. It has a valid conditional use permit. But we have been receiving a number of concerns from individuals who own property that is zoned RM, and they thought, you know, in their own minds, this is a zone that I could maybe implement a future use.
Right.
So with that kind of conversation that we've been having with individuals, we're now kind of rethinking, you know, what we really want to do with RM. And so I think there's going to be a nice discussion at the commission. I think we have some alternatives to what is initially improved or proposed. And I think it'll allow for some additional, you know, site-specific regulation and use regulations to be able to allow individuals an option to either, you know, commence a new use with a use permit. But we've got some ideas that, you know, might be able to implement into the code. But we absolutely encourage those conversations with the public, and specifically those property owners in which changes like this might have a direct effect on.
And let me ask you about the property that may have a zone change, it already has a business on it, let's just use that for simplicity, but it's gonna be a non-conforming use going forward. What if they sell that business?
The use runs with the land.
Okay.
So in the case of the one rural home industry that is still in business today, that is an approved conditional use permit, and the conditional use permit will run with the land. So if they choose to sell the property, they can sell the use permit and the operation along with the property. It doesn't matter who operates the business. The fact of the matter is that it's an approved use permit. Now, if the use that was approved through a conditional use permit is discontinued for more than 12 months, then the use permit then is not in effect any longer. So it is at that point effectively expired, and commencement of that use or a similar use would have to go through a conditional use permit process again, if in fact the code allows for that to occur.
And of course, there's no guarantee that it's gonna get approved a second time.
It's a discretionary
Yeah.
application,
Yeah.
so correct.
It would depend on the nature of the business and things of that nature, yes.
All right. So are we ready to learn how to find our zones and
How to navigate
how to
the
navigate the website?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I think we've got everything that you possibly need up on the website. We have been working what I consider to be really hard to get notice out to the public. We've had a number, 2 different flyers that we have been circulating out in the public for a month now. One of them is frequently asked questions regarding the zoning update, and the other one is a flyer that tells people how to get involved in the zoning ordinance update process.
All right.
Those are on the web. We have also managed to disperse these throughout the public, just trying to get the word out. We did an email blast to everyone that is on our planning department email notification list. In addition, I have handed off multiple copies to all of our supervisors and planning commissioners, asking them to please distribute them throughout their districts, post them in, you know, different locations, and of course they are posted on the web as well for information. So if you actually go to the planning homepage of the county website, it should have popped up immediately. Okay, looks like something got disabled, but the zoning update get involved flyer should have been
Popped up.
and it was working. I
Automatically.
don't know why it's not
Yeah.
working on the laptop, but it was working as of last week.
Well, let's try just going in again and we'll
Yeah.
just see. Because it worked this morning, I actually looked it
Oh,
up this
okay,
morning.
okay.
And it was there, so I can confirm.
Yeah.
And we'll just go quickly back to planning. Huh, Well, it's not wanting to pop up,
Well, we
but
just didn't, we
I
just
wonder-
updated it with some information, so I wonder if maybe we didn't accidentally disable it
The
somehow,
link.
but, we'll have to look at that when we get back to the office.
Okay.
But you can find, all the information relative to the zoning code update in two different places. So one, if you click on the zoning option and then down on zoning code update, which is the second one, you have, first in red, you've got a link that takes you to the public portal that GIS created for us. And what this is an actual map of all of the parcels in the county that will be affected specifically by an amended zoning as a
All right.
result of the zoning code update. So all the parcels that you see in red,
And how am I getting this
Uh,
bigger up here?
you can zoom in using your mouse.
Okay, so
if
there's a
you-
little plus sign on the
Yeah.
left side of the screen here.
You can also, if you
And I can
are
bring it
a,
over.
Yeah.
Just-
you can also search the parcel by assessor parcel number or by address.
And I do that here,
Yep,
Yeah, just type it in.
all right. And they probably want a city too.
no, they don't.
Okay,
As a
good.
matter of fact, I think you, hit search. No results. You
That is-
probably don't need the word drive.
Okay,
Mhm.
hard to see this keyboard when I'm.
Yeah,
There we go. And I got everything in a different spot. I'm just gonna, there we go.
okay.
That'll work. Oh,
Did it come up?
I don't think it liked me spelling out drive.
No,
So
no.
there you go, don't
Yeah.
spell out drive.
So
And here's
as
our
you're
parcels.
typing your address, then the information starts coming up on that drop down. So if you note that, you can just click on it and search that way. So, so you'll notice that the properties in the is this Golden Hills subdivision?
Yeah,
All the properties in Golden Hills subdivision are being proposed to be rezoned from RRX, which is rural residential existing parcel size,
okay,
to rural residential. So one of the proposals in the update is to eliminate the X overlay zone. And the X overlay zone has been used over the years for the purpose of indicating or further restricting a parcel from being further subdivided. In these cases, since the general plan update in 2019, all previous minimum parcel sizes are basically superseded by the new code, by the general plan. And so the general plan actually dictates your minimum parcel size through the land use designation, building intensity, building population and intensity, along with water and sewer availability. So your general plan dictates what parcel sizes and the range of the parcel sizes that each parcel has the ability, or
Which kind of addresses one of the things, which one of the goals of this revision also is to remove some of the redundancies
right.
that we have in the current code. So removing this X overlay, for example, I mean, is, you know, if the general plan already identifies what the maximum parcel size should be, why should the zoning ordinance have a designation of X on it that says it can be further subdivided? So that is one example of one of the things that we would try to do in this particular zoning ordinance process.
okay, so that explains why I got a notice. I had no idea that I was RR-X, I thought I was RR. What if I don't wanna have you change that? What if I wanna be RA instead of RR? I only have 5 acres, but,
Well, let me,
what would I do if I
well,
wanna protest what you're
there are
doing?
two things. There are two things. When it comes to changing the zoning of the property, there are two elements: the zoning of the property, the zoning of the surrounding properties, and then the general plan designation of the property. So, if you have an RR zone and you want it to go into an RA zone, first of all, you have to make sure, what are those properties, what is the zoning of the properties surrounding your property? Are they RR or are they RA? That's question number one. Question number two is, what is the general plan designation of your particular property? Is it compatible with, is the general plan compatible, is the zoning compatible with the general plan, or is the general plan compatible with the zoning or with the new zoning designation? So those are the questions that we have to answer. So it is not automatic. It would really depend on whether or not by doing this, we're gonna have a situation whereby you'll be the only RA zone property in a sea of RR zone properties. I
Right.
mean, it's still residential, but, you know, like Gina explained earlier, rural residential, where it puts emphasis on residential versus an RA that puts more emphasis on agriculture, there might be a conflict. So those are the kind of things that we would want to look into in a situation like yours, where you might propose something totally different.
Right. And in your specific case, through the update process, we're not proposing to amend your base zone. We're proposing to amend the overlay zone, or in
Okay.
this case, delete the overlay zone.
Sure.
So your base zone of rural residential will remain rural residential.
Okay. I don't have an issue with changing it and taking the overlay out, but if I did, what would I do?
To take,
If I wanted to
To change
talk
the
to the
zoning
planning
from,
department and say, I understand the zoning update is coming, you're doing to
So
change
you-
my zone and I don't want you to, how
you
do I?
oppose the deletion of the X combined, then you would need to participate in the process, provide us either with testimony at, verbal comment at the study session, or what's even better is for you or any other individual,
or
property
something in
owner,
writing.
to provide us with written comments and concerns. Because at the end of the study sessions, we will be compiling all of those comments and concerns, and we will be, vetting those through this process and determining, what, maybe is there something that we've overlooked? Are there changes that need to be made, modifications to the draft? So all of those, so no question is a bad question. No concerns, even if your concern doesn't actually result in a change, you owe it to yourself and to other people, of course, that might have the same concern, to voice your concerns and ask those questions.
Oh, absolutely.
And you
That's-
might also want to state the reason why
Right.
you don't want to change, so that if it's something we haven't even anticipated, then it gives us an opportunity to kind of look into that specifically. Everything that we're proposing to do here is still a proposal. Nothing is firm. We're going to go through the public hearing process, and we're going to gather information, and then the planning commission is going to make a recommendation. Then it goes to the board for final approval. So
This is a lengthy process.
it's a lengthy process.
Very lengthy process.
Mhm.
So starting tomorrow at 9 a.m.
Yes,
in the board chambers at the government center will be the first of the meetings dealing with the
Yes.
zoning updates.
the first of many study sessions.
Okay, and in general, they're gonna be every Wednesday going forward and the second and fourth Thursday of the month until we
Yes.
get through the process?
Yes.
Absolutely,
Okay,
yeah.
excuse me. So let's go back to the website, and we're gonna go back to planning.
Okay. So in addition to the portal, for you to identify what the proposed zone change is, we actually have the draft, the first section, the zoning code, draft zone districts and use regulations. That would be the second icon down.
Oh, sorry,
Move it
went
back
to the wrong one.
Yeah.
Because I can't count to 2 today.
There we go, right there.
There we go.
So as
Oh, nice.
individuals are, individual property owners and others are getting their notices and word of mouth, they're calling in. Of course, the immediate concern is, are my taxes gonna go up? Which of course is a concern of everyone's, and the answer is no. None of this will result in increase in taxes.
All right.
But, you know, people are concerned, what are you doing to my zoning? But there's really two parts of this, and the bigger part of what we're doing, and the most important, I think, is the draft code itself. So this is the text amendment, and we've been encouraging everyone to get on and read it, and you know, work your way through it. It's a lengthy document, but it's worth it. If you have any questions, you know, call us, come by the counter, you know, we can run it through with you, answer any of your questions, explain the whole process. But more particular, if you really are that concerned, which you should be, come to the study sessions and get involved. And you don't have to participate in you know, in person. You can participate via Zoom. The Zoom link is actually on the agenda, which is posted on the county calendar. And it's very easy to use and access.
Okay, and then I just want to point out to people that you can make the screen bigger by clicking the plus sign. So if you don't want to put your glasses on like I don't feel like doing right now, you can just make it bigger.
Yeah.
And there you go.
Yeah.
And then if we go back to the planning tab, we can go up to the top, and we've got the phone numbers right here. Our address is right here, and you're still closed on Wednesdays. And obviously now everybody's going to be in the meeting anyway.
No,
but-
we're open on
Wednesdays.
Wednesdays
Okay.
now.
Yeah. On Wednesdays now.
And all of the notices are directing people to me.
Okay.
But all of our staff is capable of handling those initial, you know, questions. So the zoning questions are fairly easy for staff. If questions are getting a little too deep into the text amendment itself, then and they don't feel comfortable, then they'll refer that caller to me. But certainly, our staff is everyone is on board, and they're up to date, and they're handling questions at the counter and dealing with all the phone calls, so.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah.
And I'm glad to know you're open on Wednesdays again. I
Yeah.
don't have
Oh,
to
yes.
throw rocks at the window anymore.
That's
I know.
true.
Let me just emphasize that we really encourage public participation.
Absolutely.
We really do. And because it's the crux of how we're going to get to bring every piece of concern and information together. We're not doing this in a vacuum. We're doing this to fulfill a general plan obligation, but at the same time, we want to be as transparent and open as possible.
Right. And this is a code for everyone. You know, this is the document that will, you know, drive our land use.
Sure.
And so it affects everyone, and everyone, you know, needs to be involved, because, you know, we look at it from one perspective, but we want everyone to tell us what they think from their perspective. How are these changes going to affect them? And maybe there's some changes that we need to implement that we hadn't thought of yet.
Sure. And maybe I buy a piece of property that's not the corner of my subdivision, but the house one lot in, and I can go to the general plan and see, was this zoned for commercial? So that I know that 10 years from now, suddenly a mini mart might not just go in there by right. And then I'm sitting next to a mini mart when I wanted to be in between
Absolutely.
two residents.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So what you're talking about is a combination of general plan, land use designations, and zoning, and you can find that information all on the public portal, not the zoning portal that we just showed you, but on the planning portal that is different from this. So.
So do we have a?
Yeah, so if we, now you have to forgive me because
Go ahead.
I have a different application than this, but I believe if we go up here to zoning and then go to, whoop, let's see, GIS map. Should take us to the public portal. Yeah.
Okay.
That gives us zoning information as well as general plan information.
Can you explain to me the difference between land designation and zoning?
Yeah, so the land use designation is applied through the county general plan, which is a long-term document that sets forth policies and implementation for our county vision.
Okay.
You know, how we want Calaveras County to look in terms of, whether it's preservation of, open space, ag land, commerce. There's policies that are in this document that basically set kind of a roadmap
Okay.
for county development. Now, the zoning code itself is a very parcel-specific document.
Okay.
So if you want to know what you can and cannot do on your property, you would go to the county zoning code to identify the zone in which your property is zoned and what that allows you to do. But again, the general plan is a long-term document that is, in the sense, very general. The general plan land use designations are established, allowing specific zones within the land use designations.
Now, the one thing that has to happen is that the zoning has to be consistent with the general plan designation. So you don't have a situation whereby it's designated commercial in the general plan. Just pick a commercial category and then zone residential. That's an
Okay.
inconsistency. So it would have to be somehow consistent with commercial activity, not residential activity, or vice versa. So, and the general plan designations are broad categories, but within those categories are specific goals that identify what the zoning of each property is going to be. And every once in a while, we have situations whereby there's not a consistency between the zoning and the general plan. So this exercise really isn't a tool to bring that relevance together. This is more of we're doing a lot of cleanups, we're doing a lot of removing redundancies and things and so on and so forth. When we did the general plan update in 2019, we tried to catch as many of those inconsistencies as possible. So after we go through this exercise, hopefully there are not that very many properties that would be left that would have that general plan zoning inconsistency.
Okay, so let's say there's a area on the general plan and it's all zoned commercial. Or not zoned commercial, it's designated
Designated.
commercial as a land use in the general plan, and then we get into specific parcels, and this one might be CP, this one might be C1, this one might be C, I don't know all the C designations, but within that general land designation, you could have a variety of zones that fit that
Absolutely.
general category.
Yes.
Okay.
And in the case of the commercial, it'll be a kind of a system of intensity, whereby you have the C2, which is more intensive in use than the C1 or the CP. So, and we arrive at that conclusion based A, on maybe location, B, proximity to similarly zoned properties, or proximity to non-residentially zoned properties. So we don't try to bring a very high intensive commercial or industrial use next to a residential use as much as we can. So what you might see might be a transition from a high intensive industrial or commercial use buffered by somewhat of a similarly zoned property before you actually transition into residential. At least that is the general image. Doesn't always happen, but that's the general. That's basically what we look for.
Well, that makes a lot of sense to me. Kind of like the windbreaks that used to grow trees in South Dakota so the wind didn't.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Good.
Is there anything else we should talk about the zone update that we haven't touched on, do you think? Let me just quickly go back to the website and see.
Have we talked about the 3 sections of,
Yeah, so the other 2 sections that are not out for public review yet, the second one is use regulations. And so we've got, or not use, countywide regulations. And then the third and final will be administration. So, you know, the process of each application that we have in code, and the not just the process, but it also will reiterate the responsibilities of the planning director and the planning commission, and things like that. So I would say, like I think I previously said, the real meat of the code will be in this first zone district and use regulations. The second will be of great interest as well. It's
Absolutely.
countywide regulations. That will be all things, you know, that will basically, in general, you'll find landscape requirements, parking requirements, signage, things like that. Things that will affect just about every one of these individual categories.
Okay, and that is not posted yet?
No, not yet.
that will be the next phase.
That'll be the next phase.
We didn't want people to get too far down the road without having a discussion about the first section first, so we'll find the appropriate time, depending on how quickly this rolls through, to be able to post that and give people ample
Absolutely.
opportunity
And
to
also,
review
it could be so overwhelming when we
Yes.
present so much information to the public. So even for the planning commission, it could be overwhelming.
Yes.
Yeah,
I was
for
gonna say, I'm
for
in those
staff.
planning commission
Well,
meetings, you know, I've been in
Right,
them
yeah.
for a lot of years now, and
Right,
I'm
right.
still sometimes
Right.
baffled about what's going on.
Absolutely.
Well, it's,
So-
and as Gabriel said, we are changing the entire structure of this code. And so it looks, and you're able to use it completely different than we currently do. And so that in itself is gonna be a learning curve.
Sure.
Just to kind of, you know, because you're so accustomed to a certain format that the new format initially is probably going to be overwhelming for, I know it was for me at first. And the more you get to work it and the more you read it, the more you realize this is really nice. It works. It's easy to find things. The use categories are a lot nicer and more flexible than that strict, you know, list of uses. The whole thing just flows, and it's a lot easier to find what you're looking for.
Absolutely.
And so I think once the public and the commission get through that and come to grips with the new format, then the rest of it will just kind of fall into place.
Okay, so we went through how I can find my zone, how I can find out if it's being changed, and where do I go to find out what I can do in R, I keep going back, cause I'm
Currently?
RR. So with the general plan implementation, how do I know what I can still do in a RR zone? Where do I find
So
that?
if you're talking about the current code, then you will find current code here under the zoning tab, and it says zoning code. That'll take you to this Muni code, which actually is the entire county code.
Wow.
Which is chapter
And-
17 is where the zoning code is.
So Title 17 is all the way to the bottom, and as you open it up, if I can get rid of this, I don't know what it says, but I don't like it. So here you have different categories. If you're looking specifically for what you can do in your specific zone, then first you need to identify what type of zone you have. So you are talking about a residential zone, specifically rural residential, which I
Go down
believe
one.
is it one? Does that say resource?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's hard to read
I
from
can't
there
read
right
it,
now. It's
yeah,
hard.
okay.
But you know what,
So-
it's fine, wherever we
so
are,
that's
it doesn't,
fine.
it doesn't matter.
So each one of our zonings is in a different grouping, if you
Sure.
will. And they are grouped according to, similarities, similar characteristics. For instance, all your commercial zonings, will be lumped into one. Your residential zonings will be in another category, and so on and so on. So, now you have this long list of uses that are enumerated in each zone district. And now we have,
And then this will get replaced with the new information at some
Yes.
point when we get through
Absolutely.
the, okay.
You will
That
see,
is
you will
the
see a
intent.
table that has, in each column would have a zoning designation, and then the land uses just kind of follow through with permitted, conditional, administrative use permit, et cetera, et cetera. It's very, very user-friendly up to that point. Here, you just see a list of uses.
Sure.
yeah.
Okay.
So now instead of the long list of, in my opinion, outdated uses, now we have a nice updated version that includes these nice categories. And so all of our residential uses will be listed as such under residential, and in this particular, these are resource zones. All of these residential uses follow through here in this chart, and they are enumerated as P is for permitted, A is for administrative, meaning you need approval of administrative use permit, and the C is a reference to a conditional use.
Now, if there's no A's or C's on
These are all
here,
indicated as permitted uses.
but if there's no use that's listed as a conditional or
Right, so we'll
administrative,
use a
then,
duplex as, a multifamily residential use.
okay,
You're not gonna find that listed here. As we have said, it's not a consistent or compatible use with these zones. These are resource zones. So
okay.
these are not zones in which you could actually develop your property as, say, condominiums or townhomes or a multifamily residential land use.
Right.
So it's an incompatible land use with these zone districts.
So another angle to your question would be, so let's say you have a commercially zoned property, and you would look through all these specific commercial uses, but your particular proposed land use is not listed. Under the current code, the planning director is allowed to make a compatibility finding, which
Okay.
is based on the uses that are allowed in this zone, the use that you're proposing is similar to a permitted use or a conditional use in that same zone. So we would allow that use based on that compatibility zoning. I think with the new zoning ordinance, what we're trying to do is, I think we're still going to have that compatibility kind of finding given to the planning director, but you'd find broader categories of commercial uses rather than something that's really specific. So we have an umbrella of, let's say, a different type of commercial activity.
Right.
You just kind of fill in the blanks. So
Yeah.
what falls under the category of a beauty parlor? So rather than listing a nail salon or a hair salon or pedicure or manicure or whatever, that comes under the big
Right.
umbrella, and so it's
We're
kind of
using
more
more general terms.
intuitive than specific.
Yeah.
So, just out of curiosity, the cigar bar,
Mhm.
that would have,
Absolutely, that went to the planning commission because we don't have a cigar shop specifically listed, even though we have wine tasting rooms and things of that nature. So I think one of the questions I'd asked, that I made a comment on when I was reviewing the table is, what happens to those kinds of categories? Are we going to list them? Because if they're not listed, we're going to but we're gonna be back to where we were before.
Right.
And these are not uses that are gonna go away. I mean,
Right.
these are uses that we
Well,
should make allocations
They're kind of
for.
upcoming, it's, and this is one of the reasons why we
Right.
need to update this code is to bring it up to, current uses.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of uses that we currently enumerate that are so outdated, nobody does those things anymore.
Anymore,
And
yeah.
who knew disc golf was gonna be a thing?
I know, right?
You
Yeah.
know, I mean, disc golf is not listed on there
Right,
anywhere.
right,
Yes,
right,
So future uses, you're also trying to set the plan up so that
Absolutely, absolutely.
when new businesses, new
Yeah.
types of businesses that
Yeah.
we don't currently
Yeah.
have
we
in
want to
existence.
allow that flexibility
Yeah.
to be able to say, yes, that use
Yeah.
is similar to these other uses,
Absolutely.
and it is therefore part of this category.
So,
Okay.
if we say tennis court, we'll also make sure we call out pickleball court.
Oh, there you go. 14 pickleball. courts.
Absolutely, so, so we're not saying, well, pickleball is not eliminated,
Yeah.
even though it's not listed specifically, but, it falls under that family of the tennis courts and stuff like that.
Sure.
But indoor and outdoor,
That makes sense.
yeah,
All right.
just little nuances like that.
Which are really important.
They are.
You know, they might seem little right now, but when you bump up against one of them, that can be a really big barrier to something that you really
Right.
wanted to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And then less research for staff, because it's more straightforward. We don't have to start digging. What does this mean? Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
well, and it's, it becomes very difficult for staff to implement code when we have to make that determination every time. Then we have this list of, determinations that we've made previously just for consistency,
Mhm.
and the list is pretty lengthy right now.
Right now, yeah.
And when you get to that point, you know that your code's just not working for you anymore.
Right. And it's too difficult for someone from the outside to actually look and see what's going on because
Right.
Right,
they don't know they've got to also go find the 300 exceptions that,
exactly.
Got
Well, and we're still finding the 300 exceptions.
Mhm.
I mean, something is wrong when you have 4 or 5 different definitions of camping.
that is true. That is true.
And, the code was first adopted in 1961. The majority of the code that we see today is dates back to 1986.
Okay.
Since then, we've done a number of little fix-its.
Sure.
I call them Band-Aids. But we've done some amendments over the years. But some of those haven't been real considerate of other sections of code.
Mhm.
And so as we're focusing on one section and we're making amendments to that one section, some of that has overflowed into other sections of code that didn't get updated.
Absolutely.
So, we need to, this exercise is intended to clean up all those inconsistencies and, reduce the numbers of definitions of camping and create a more, like I said, concise and user-friendly code. We needed to update it with state and federal regulations, that, we just were absent, any language in the code. For instance, the state of California adopted the MWILO, which is the Model Water Efficiency Ordinance, a number of years ago, and it requires local jurisdictions to enforce more drought-resistant plantings and similar, processes in your landscaping, and we hadn't done that. So, trying to implement the MWILO state regulations when your code is absent, it's been very difficult. So now it's going to be updated and make a direct reference to, drought-resistant and water-efficient landscaping requirements. And
where are we with composting toilets?
oh, that's not our
That's
not
not
our
yours,
purview.
that's-
No,
okay.
you'll have to talk to Lisa
It's
Medina.
about that. All
Yeah.
right, all right. I was just thinking about some of the things that,
Right.
gray water, that's a difference, that's a change.
Absolutely,
that-
yeah,
Absolutely,
yeah.
Do we
Yeah,
have a code
that's
for
in-
gray water?
That is environmental management,
That's also
and I
environment-
cannot
okay.
speak to that.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, then I'll jump off of that.
Mm-hmm.
We wanted to talk about accessory dwellings.
Yeah.
Is this a good time to do that, or is there
Yeah.
more general plan things we should
No,
talk
no,
about?
we can talk about it. In fact, the ADU study there's a study session coming up before the Board of Supervisors, I think on the 24th,
Okay,
to talk about this ADU, what we're calling, it's an ADU app. And it is designed in collaboration with 4 other counties. Each county received a sum of money from the state to develop an ADU program. And the Amador, Tuolumne, Mariposa, Nevada, and Calaveras counties are putting their money together to hire a consultant to go over this ADU process. And so the outcome of this is that all the counties selected one consultant that actually wrote this particular process. And one of the good things about what we get out of this process would be, one, we get a pamphlet that kind of tells you all the ins and outs of how to get an ADU built on your property, what the average cost would be. There is a rent calculator designed into this particular element that would tell you how much you can rent it for, what the size of the unit has to be, what some of the expected utility costs might be, because that's something that most people who want to build ADUs need to be aware of, is that it might get a separate water, sewer, and electrical units, facilities to them if it's not part of the main residence. And the water and the sewer, the county doesn't provide those services, so that's a third-party company that's going to provide those services. So this particular handout will give you that type of information. There's a website totally dedicated towards that as well. And if we, it goes to the board on the 24th, if we have the opportunity to come back and go and dedicate another half an hour to an hour just to talk about ADUs, that would be wonderful, because this is something that I think is a useful tool to members of this community.
I agree. I think it's a really useful way to increase the housing, the amount of housing available in our county. I
Absolutely.
believe that's part of the
Mm-hmm.
intent of the state by,
Yeah.
didn't they just declare a year or so ago that every lot was allowed an accessory dwelling unit?
Residentially, well, every residentially zoned property could have an ADU that is not going to have an impact on density.
Okay.
And you can also have what is called a junior ADU, which has to be less than at least up to 500 square feet within the existing footprint of an existing building. The other ADU could be detached or attached to the existing residence. But one thing you can't use an ADU for is Airbnb. You can't use it for that. It would have to be for, if it's going to be for housing, it's got to be used for housing for those who are in need of that housing, not for rental.
Permanent long
So I was gonna say permanent, long-term
Right,
rental
Right.
or a family member or
Family
someone that-
member,
that's gonna
back
be
in
in
the
there.
day, they would say it's a granny unit or a granny flat or a second unit. Now it's just an accessory dwelling unit.
Okay, and does that reflect the fact that we're now encouraging people to build them for more uses than just bringing mom back to the family home, basically?
No, there's no restriction that says only mom can live in the ADU. You can rent it out to non-members of your
And
family.
But is that a change? I think in the past, at
In the
least-
past, when it was called a granny unit or a second unit, it had to be for a family member, and there even did restrictions that basically identified who could live or not live in them. ADUs are totally different.
so that's completely changed, so that's
Right.
good.
Right.
That is good. And I think the point about the water and sewer is really important
It is.
because there's gonna be a lot of people that are on septic tanks. Now, whether that septic tank, existing septic tank can handle
The
another
additional
dwelling,
1,200
Right.
square feet, absolutely. That's a
Yes.
very, very
Yeah.
good point.
and then the existing septic that I have that's not an engineered septic, I may end up having to get an engineered septic for
Right.
that new
Yeah.
dwelling unit.
Right.
Yeah, and so
Right.
the ADU still has to go through the process of a building permit, and through that building permit process, it'll be determined as to whether or not an expansion of that existing system, or
Mhm.
maybe a brand-new system
Mhm.
to accommodate the ADU might have to be installed. So all of that has to be complied with, whatever regulation is in place, to ensure there's adequate sewage disposal in addition to water.
Are we allowing the traditional septic systems we put in anymore, excuse me?
I don't know. I think
I
that's
just-
obviously gonna depend on your soils, but again, that's environmental, management
Okay.
agency, so that's Lisa Medina's house.
Sorry, I keep straying into other departments.
Yeah, so environmental management, deals with, on-site wastewater as well as, our well program, in addition to all environmental health, regulations, restaurants, public pools, things like that, in addition to air pollution control, agriculture weights and measures, and animal services.
Okay, so there's more than planning that
Oh,
goes into
absolutely.
building this house.
We're just a
Right.
small building block.
Small, but
Excuse
very
me. But
effective.
yes, and important.
We are the cornerstone of
All right.
development in the county.
And is there a specific place on the planning website that we can go find information about ADUs, or is that?
Absolutely. There is, I think if you type in accessory dwelling unit on the county website, it should take you to,
Okay. I think that, I'm not,
and on the
it's
brochure.
really hard to see this.
Yeah, and on the brochure, there's a link that could take you directly to
Ah, there it
the
is.
Yeah.
website that has all that information that you need on it.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you, Gabriel and Gina. I almost called you Peter again. I don't know what it's the Angel Gabriel and
All right.
Peter's at the gate. That is what the
Absolutely.
problem is.
Absolutely.
But thank you so much for coming and
Thank you.
talking about general plans and zoning update, because I learned a lot, and I feel like, I've had a good education filming the planning commission meetings, but
Absolutely.
I learned a lot today, so
Thank you,
thank you.
Susan.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Yes.